Oh, hell's bells, that's good. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather, and this is Reading with a Vengeance. So I am relatively new to BookTube, and as I'm scrolling through looking for ideas on what to record, I come across the middle grade March videos. So I decided to give it a go. Up until last year, I hadn't read any middle grade books since I was a middle grader. So last year, as I had said in my last video, I had expanded my genre horizon, and I did include middle grade, YA, all these other things, and I've really enjoyed it. And so when I came across the videos that people were making for middle grade March, I decided to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring. And then when I started to look up books to include in this video, it became an exercise in nostalgia. So as I've also said in a previous video, I do not reread books. I just don't. There's too many books that I want to get to. I just feel like I want to read new stuff. Anyways, I do have one exception to that, and I will talk about it when I get to it. You know, some people have that special book that they reread every year. I have one of those. And then there's like another half exception to that, and I'll talk about that in a minute when I get to the books. Many of the books on this list are widely known, whether they be traditional classics or new classics. Hopefully you'll find some books on here that you have heard about but just haven't read yet, and maybe this will be the push you need to give it a go. Full disclosure, most, if not all of these books are dated. And I mean dated not just in the literal sense, but in the ideas that are in the books. Some of these books have gotten criticized because of the ideas that are put forth in the book. And the truth of the matter is that there have been ideas that have been expressed in literature in the past, and that's just the nature of history. That's not to say that there isn't a story to be told that's valuable. That's not to say that there isn't value in these books, in these stories. And so I hope that if you do read some of these books, or you have read some of these books and they have expressed ideas that have currently gotten criticism, that you'll just take that with a grain of salt and take the stories that are within these books for what they were meant to be. The way I look at it is that in order to have a clearer picture of where we want to go, we have to have a better understanding of where we've been. Now, I know there also is a fine line or blurred line, however you want to say it, between middle grade books and children's books, and middle grade books and young adult books. So keep that in mind as I give you my recommendations and my favorites. These are books that I read in that middle grade age and enjoyed them. And so this list will also include, I'm gonna start this list with books that are popular or common favorites in the middle grade-ish range, just to kind of give you an idea of what's to come. And then I'll follow that up with books that are my favorites, and then books that I hope to read in middle grade March. So let's get started with the books. Starting off with a handful of books that I just did not enjoy. The first one, I might get a lot of flack for. What am I gonna do? Anyways, Little Women. I did not enjoy Little Women. I appreciate it is a classic for good reason. I don't think I have to give a synopsis of the story. 4 sisters trying to survive while their dad is off at war. Nope. Another book that I just did not really enjoy, I ended up listening to it, was The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I know I slaughtered the hell out of that. I did not enjoy The Little Prince. Another one that is a very popular favorite in middle grade, The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. It was just okay to me. It was cute, but it just didn't, no. And the last book I'll put on here that's just not one of my favorites was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. This, again, was okay, if not slightly depressing. These 4 books that I'm talking about that I'm not a big fan of, I did read as an adult, and maybe they hit a little bit different if you read them as a middle grader or a young adult. I don't know. I just didn't enjoy them. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn was downright depressing. And I guess that some depressing books can be magical. I don't know. It just wasn't for me. So let's get on to books that were my favorites. And again, I'll say I read all of these books as a middle grader. So just keep that in mind. I'll start with a couple of very common favorites in this genre. I highly recommend, will always recommend the Harry Potter books. I read those, actually I didn't read those as a middle grader because they came out and I was already an adult. There's a lot of discontent for the author, but I don't think that takes away the value of the story behind Harry Potter. So I will always recommend Harry Potter. I think everybody should read Harry Potter. They're beautiful, magical stories. I won't even go into the synopsis because everybody's heard of Harry Potter. Another classic and popular is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. This is one of the things I was talking about earlier where this was a reread for me. I reread The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe just recently in December, because I wanted to refresh my memory, because I wanted to read the other books in the series. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was a favorite when I was a child. I absolutely love it. It didn't hit the same reading it as an adult. I kind of want to just put it out of my mind that I didn't read it. And then I read The Magician's Nephew. I think I read, of course, The Magician's Nephew first. And then I reread The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And then I started to read the next one in the series, couldn't get into it. Yeah, I didn't continue on with the series. But for a middle grader, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, absolutely, highly recommend. This is about young children who are sent off, I believe, to live with their grandparents or uncle. They're in this big ornate house, and the youngest daughter finds this wardrobe, goes into the wardrobe, and the wardrobe is a portal into this magical world, and all kinds of crazy stuff happens, and it's wonderful. Highly recommend. And again, that's by C.S. Lewis, if I didn't say that before. Another classic that I highly recommend is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, or basically anything by Roald Dahl. But Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was a favorite. The original movie with Gene Wilder is a favorite of mine. Highly, highly recommend. Kind of goes without saying, but basically this follows Charlie, who is very, very poor, lives with his parents and both sets of grandparents. And Willy Wonka runs a very famous candy factory, and he decides to put out 5 tickets hidden in candy, and 5 children will win the opportunity to go on a tour in the factory. And Charlie wins a ticket, and he goes, and all kinds of chaos ensues. Everybody knows this story. This is one of my favorites, and I highly recommend. And finally, one that's also very, very common, very, very well known. It's one of my all-time favorite books, is To Kill a Mockingbird. And this is my one special book that I reread most years. I'd say in the past couple of years, it's been more like every 2 or 3 years. But I have reread it many, many times. And I keep forgetting to say the author, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. And this is one of those books that I not only keep a copy in my library, I like to collect different editions. So I have the 35th anniversary edition. It's beautiful hardcover. When I went on a trip to Italy, I found one in a bookstore. So I have an Italian edition, which is beautiful. I found one in a secondhand store that has I'm not a huge fan of, movie pictures on the front, but I love the movie as well. So I love that they have that picture on the cover. But anyway, it's just a different edition, and I added it to my collection. And then I also have the graphic novel. I have yet to read the graphic novel, but so I just thought that was a really nice addition to my collection. But if you don't know already, To Kill a Mockingbird takes place in Depression era, Deep South, and it follows Scout, and it's mostly from her perspective. Scout is a young girl, and she lives with her brother, her older brother, Jim, and their widowed father, Atticus, who is the town attorney. And there's a couple of stories here, but a young black man is accused of raping a white woman, and he is put on trial, and Atticus defends him, and he gets into a lot of trouble with the town folk defending him. And then it also kind of follows Scout. It's a little bit of a coming of age story where they hear stories about a very mysterious neighbor who lives on the same street that Jim and Scout do, and they want to know more about this mysterious neighbor whose name is Boo Radley, who is a little bit of a recluse, and for reasons that you find out. I highly recommend To Kill a Mockingbird for any age. Okay, so on to the books that most likely you've heard of, but they're not really, like I said, they've been around for a long time, so you don't really hear a whole lot about them anymore. Hopefully you find some books on this list to add to your TBR. The first one is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume, or basically anything by Judy Blume, but this one was my favorite as a kid. This follows Margaret, who is an 11-year-old girl, and while she's away at camp, her parents decide to move from exciting Manhattan to the suburbs of New Jersey, and Margaret has to kind of adapt. When she does move to the suburbs, she is surprised to find out that a lot of people are interested in what religion she is, and she doesn't really have one. I can't remember which one is which, but I believe her mother is Jewish and her father is Christian. And so Margaret doesn't really have a religion. So she tries to find out which one works best for her, all the while having conversations in kind of a journal-like fashion with the big guy upstairs. You also follow her as she experiences life from 11-year-old turning 12. She's got her close-knit group of girlfriends. She's dealing with her first bra, her first period, school, boys, and the like. Super, super entertaining. The next book on this list, I actually have a copy because my husband wants to read it. He hasn't read it yet, and that is Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. This one I almost had on my favorites of 2021. I loved this book, and it was probably one of the first middle grade books that I read as an adult. So this takes place in a utopian future where after a revolution has vanquished all the monsters in the world, the monsters kind of represent all the evils that take place in our society, systemic inequalities, and the injustices that exist. The story follows Jam, a 15-year-old black transgender girl who is selectively mute. She only speaks verbally with her mother. One day, Jam cuts her finger on a painting that her mother does, and from the painting emerges a creature who communicates with Jam telepathically. And Jam is initially afraid, but the creature kind of looks like a monster, and the creature tells her not to be afraid of him, that he's not a monster, but he's here to hunt a monster, and he needs Jam's help. The monster tells Jam to call him Pet, and Pet tells Jam that the monster he is hunting is residing in Jam's best friend's house. So, and it goes from there. It's a short one. I'm pretty sure I got through it in one sitting. It's great. The next book on this list is Holes by Louis. I'm not sure how to say his last name, Sachar. You'll see it up here. This follows Stanley Yelnats. He's overweight, lonely, and poor, and he's just been arrested for a crime he didn't commit. He is sent to a place called Camp Green Lake, which is a juvenile detention facility in Texas. Over the course of the book, we get 3 different timelines. We get the story of Stanley and his unlikely friendship with the other boys he meets at the camp. We get the story of Stanley's great-great-grandfather who gets a curse put on him and his family by this gypsy he meets. And we also get the story of Miss Katherine and her transformation. And I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to give spoilers, but this is a great read. There was a movie made that I thought they did a really great job. Both I would highly recommend. The next book on this list is a very popular one, and for good reason, and that is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. This book follows August, or Augie, who's a 10-year-old boy. He was born with a craniofacial deformity, and because of that and all the surgeries that it entails, his parents have homeschooled him all his life. But now he's 10 years old. His parents are now thinking of long-term. His mother believes that she's pretty much taught him all she's able, and their parents decide to send him to public school so that he can learn more, and more importantly, to be able to learn how to navigate the world that we live in. So they send him back to school. And the principal of the school sets up kind of a greeting committee of these 3 children. I believe it's Charlotte, Jack, and Julian. Charlotte becomes a really good friend of his. Jack becomes a friend-ish to him, and then Julian is just a pain in the ass and makes life hell for him. And then it also kind of follows Jack and how he, at his heart, he's a good kid, but he also, his lack of self-esteem leads him to make some choices that end up jeopardizing his friendship with Augie. And it's just a heartwarming story, just gives that message that is so important for children of that formative age. So yes, if you haven't read Wonder yet, I highly recommend. They also, of course, made a movie about this one too, and they did a fantastic job on it. The next on this list is The One and Only Ivan by Katherine Applegate. Yes. I still have a copy of this because I'm holding on to it because I want to give it to a little free library. I just haven't gotten around to do it yet. This is a really quick read. It looks kind of thick, but the way it's written, there's not a whole lot of words on the page. This is told from the perspective of Ivan, who's a silverback gorilla, and he lives in a small cage in a kind of a highway mall circus, and he has lived there for 27 years, and he's lived there with an elephant named Stella, who's elderly and injured, and they're really good friends. And then Ivan also has a frequent visitor, a stray dog named Bob. One day, the circus owner brings in a young elephant, Ruby, and Stella kind of takes her under her wing. Stella makes Ivan promise that if anything were to happen to her, that Ivan would take care of Ruby and make sure that she does not live her whole life living in a cage, and Ivan makes that promise. Meanwhile, the janitor of the circus brings his daughter, his young daughter, Julia, I believe is her name, to work sometimes where she does her homework, and she kind of befriends Ivan. Julia gives Ivan some paints for him to kind of play with, and that gives Ivan an idea on what to do to help Ruby. And the story kind of goes from there. Now, I don't want to give any spoilers. There's somewhat of a happy ending, but not the ending that you hope for. And that's all I'll say. It's super heartwarming. It's sweet. Like I said, it takes, it's the perspective of Ivan. They made a movie about this. I have yet to watch it only because I know it's going to rip my heart out. So I haven't watched it yet. Yeah, it's a super heartwarming story. The next book on this list is The Evolution of Calpurnia Tate by Jacqueline Kelly. This one took me by surprise. I loved this book. This follows Calpurnia, or as she likes to be called, Callie. She's 11 years old. She lives on a very wealthy farm with her 6 brothers. This takes place in the turn of the century, so I believe it does take place in 1899. Her mother wants Callie to stop spending so much time playing and running around outside, and it's time for Callie to learn how to be the wife she's going to grow up to be. She needs to learn how to cook. She needs to learn how to sew. Callie wants none of this. Callie wants to be a scientist. She's interested in nature. She wants to go to college. Meanwhile, her grumpy old grandfather lives with them, and she doesn't really have a relationship with him. She's actually quite afraid of him. But when she has questions about the natural world around her, I think one day she comes across and she sees that some grasshoppers are yellow and some grasshoppers are green, and she wants to know why. And so she brings these questions to her grandfather, and when her grandfather realizes the interest that Callie has, he kind of takes her under his wing and starts to educate her on these things, and they embark on this adventure that changes Callie's life. She's sassy, and she's just got all this character and personality, and you just end up loving her and rooting for her, and it's just such a great story. The next book on this list is called The K by Theodore Taylor. This I read, I think it was even before I was a middle grader, and it's one of those books that it really kind of fueled my love for reading. This is a shorter book. This book has been around for a very long time. It was published in 1969, and it is about a boy. It follows Philip, who has naive ideas about the war that's going on around them. I believe it's World War II that's happening. He's on a freighter with his mother traveling to the United States when it's torpedoed by the Germans. When Philip comes to after the crash, he finds himself on a raft with a black man and a cat. And Philip is conflicted because he remembers his mother saying previously that black people are different and they live differently. So Philip doesn't quite know what to make of this man who, I believe his name is Timothy, if I didn't say that already. By the time the raft hits an island, because of Philip's injuries, he goes blind, and he ends up relying on Timothy for survival. And the story goes from there. I want to read this as an adult just because I remember loving it so much, but I'm afraid to read it because of the experience that I had with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I just don't want to ruin the memory of it. But as a middle grader, or even I think I read it a little bit as, like I said before, a little bit younger, I absolutely loved this story. The next book on this list I have is Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH by Robert C. O'Brien. This is a whimsical story. There's an animated film that's absolutely so much fun. But this follows Mrs. Frisby, who is a widowed mouse with 4 small children. And in order to survive, she has to move her whole family away from the home that they're living in now, and they have to go away or else their home is going to be destroyed. But her youngest son, Timothy, lies in bed, and he's very, very ill, and moving him could mean death for him. But then she encounters the Rats of NIMH, who are highly intelligent, and they come up with a brilliant solution to her problem. And this follows the adventures and the near-death experiences that Mrs. Frisby faces with her children. It is a delight. The next book I have on this list is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This follows a small boy who his name is Nobody. He's known to his friends as Bod, and he's a perfectly normal boy who's being raised by ghosts in a cemetery. This book is kind of hard to explain without giving spoilers. Contrary to its title, it's not a horror, it's not a ghost story per se. While there are ghosts in it, the scariest part really about it is that there is somebody who has has killed Bod's family, and that's why he has found himself being raised by ghosts in this graveyard. And you find out why, and that this person is after Bod as well. But most of the story is just him growing up. I think it goes from the time he's a baby all the way up until he's 15. And the experiences that he has with the ghosts and with people who are not ghosts. And I highly recommend reading the physical book because there are certain ways the story is told that is much more enjoyable if you read the physical book. The last book I have on this list is Jacob Have I Loved by Katherine Paterson. This follows Louise, and she's 13 years old. This occurs early 1940s. She has a twin sister named Caroline who does everything beautifully and always manages to steal the spotlight from Louise. Louise has her best friend, Call, and one day a mysterious man comes to town, and Louise and Call make friends with this man, all the while trying to guess the secrets that make this man so mysterious. Unfortunately, Caroline manages to ruin this for Louise as well, as she becomes friends with this mysterious man. Louise has always dreamed about getting off the small island that they live on, but Caroline manages to ruin that as well because the mysterious man, who I think they call the captain, offers to send Caroline to a private music school in Baltimore. Ultimately, Call leaves and joins the Navy and goes off to war. And Louise is left behind to help her father run a fishing boat. So all these things, you're following Louise experience life and how she views that her twin sister is always doing things to, in her mind, ruin life for her. And things happen. I won't say some other things that happen to Louise that she feels Caroline ruins for her, but Louise grows up. She goes about her life and she discovers things as an adult that put a different light on how she viewed her life as a child and her relationship with her sister and Caroline herself. And it's a very important message. So those are my favorites from when I was a kid as far as middle grade books. I hope you have found some ones that you add to your TBR or that you share maybe with your children. I have a small list of books that have been on my TBR for a while that I hope to read in March. I have a couple of them. The first one that I want to read, that's The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. And this is the first in the Nevermore series. This is pretty popular on BookTube. And it's I've heard it's very kind of Harry Potter-ish. And I'll just read the back because I can't really give a summary because I haven't read it yet. Born on Eventide, the unluckiest day for any child to be born, Morgan is blamed for all local misfortunes. And worst of all, the curse dooms her to die at midnight on her 11th birthday. But as Morgan awaits her fate, a remarkable man named Jupiter North appears, whisking her away into the safety of a secret magical city called Nevermore. It's in Nevermore that Morgan discovers she must contend for a place in the city's most prestigious organization, the Wondrous Society. Morgan must compete in 4 dangerous trials against hundreds of other children, or she'll have to confront her deadly fate. Can't wait for this one. I've been wanting to read this one forever, and I just haven't gotten to it. So that's on my TBR for March. I'm embarrassed to say that I have yet to read Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I'm hoping to pick that up at the library and read that. I probably don't have to give the synopsis of that one, but I'll put the cover right up here. If you've read this one and want to give me some encouragement, please feel free to comment below. Another book that I'm kind of embarrassed I haven't read is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. It's been on my TBR forever and I just haven't. So middle grade March is like the perfect opportunity to read these books that have been on my TBR for so long. Another book I want to read in March is From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler by E.L. Konigsberg. I'll just read the synopsis from Goodreads. When Claudia Kincaid decides to run away, she knows she doesn't want to run from somewhere. She wants to run to somewhere, to a place that is comfortable, beautiful, and preferably elegant. She chooses the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Knowing her younger brother Jamie has money and thus can help her with a serious cash flow problem, she invites him along. Once settled into the museum, Claudia and Jamie find themselves caught up in the mystery of an angel statue that the museum purchased at auction for a bargain price of $225. The statue is possibly an early work of the Renaissance master Michelangelo and therefore worth millions. Is it or isn't it? Claudia is determined to find out. Her quest leads her to Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler, the remarkable old woman who sold the statue, and to some equally remarkable discoveries about herself. And finally, the last book that I hope to read in middle grade March is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. And here's a synopsis from Goodreads. Every year, the people of the Protectorate leave a baby as an offering to the witch who lives in the forest. They hope this sacrifice will keep her from terrorizing their town. But the witch in the forest, Zan, is kind and gentle. She shares her home with a wise swamp monster named Glurk and a perfectly tiny dragon, Furion. Zan rescues the abandoned children and delivers them to welcoming families on the other side of the forest, nourishing the babies with starlight on the journey. One year, Zan accidentally feeds a baby moonlight instead of starlight, filling the ordinary child with extraordinary magic. Zan decides she must raise this magicked girl, whom she calls Luna, as her own. To keep young Luna safe from her own unwieldy power, Zan locks her magic deep inside her. When Luna approaches her 13th birthday, her magic begins to emerge on schedule, but Zan is far away. Meanwhile, a young man from the Protectorate is determined to free his people by killing the witch. Soon, it is up to Luna to protect those who have protected her, even if it means the end of the loving, safe world she's always known. Doesn't that sound amazing? I'm super excited about that one. So hopefully I'm able to find that one at the library as well. So those are the books that I want to read for middle grade March. Have you read those books? If so, what did you think about them? Do you have any other recommendations that I need to add to my TBR? I would love to hear about them. I hope you enjoyed this list and I hope you enjoyed this video. I think people like to say, you know, like and subscribe. Do that if you'd like. Really, I'm just here because I love to talk about the books, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.